So much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited that you're here, and I can't wait to share you and your work with the audience. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Hi, thanks for having me. I have been a mental health counselor for the last 25 years, but if we go back further than that, I was an educator for 9 years, mostly special ed kids, and often delinquents and kids back then that we labeled emotionally disturbed. So I would look at my students and I would see like the interventions that they had outside of their classroom time with me, and it felt like they didn't work. I didn't see that they were getting a lot better from their inpatient stays or their medications or even their meetings with their counselors. And then I also am an adoptive parent and an adoptive grandparent.
Hmm.
And one of my boys was older, had a significant amount of trauma, and was extremely dysregulated. And I sought so many different things to help him. And frankly, very few of them worked very well. And it made his life harder, it made my life harder. The school called me all the time. So, those two things together. I was thinking, okay, I think I'm gonna be a counselor now, and I was considering that, and I was kind of slow rolling, just taking classes as I went, and I was getting closer to the end, and I heard about biofeedback, and I thought this is interesting, and my son could really use it, and I began to do research and check into it, determined, yes, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm gonna do with my new career as a counselor, and as I researched that, I just became more and more intrigued about how could I use that in a way that could help kids like the kids that I was teaching, that really nothing was helping them. Many of the kids that I taught I even worked at a like a juvenile prison, and the recidivism rate, as they left us at 18 or 19, was like 82% of them were going to prison. So you just like how we're failing our society and what we're doing. So I was very driven for the benefit of my own son, and as I went into this, I saw like it took him out of a place of needing medicine, and the school had called me basically every week of his life for something. And he went from eighth to ninth grade and went from five special ed classes to two after biofeedback, and the school stopped calling.
Hmm.
And and I'm not indicating that he still doesn't have disabilities. He does. He's 40 now, and he still lives with me, but he also works and drives and has a level of independence that I never thought possible. And I feel like that working on of the nervous system was such a key factor for him gaining more independence, and the work that I did with him has laid the foundation for my career in mental health. But then the last 25 years, I've thought there's even more than this. Like biofeedback is great, counseling is great, but there are a lot of things that talk therapy do not just will not fix.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I say a lot of late that talk therapy is an outdated model. And I don't say that to say that it's not valuable, that there aren't parts of it that are really important, that we can't do really, really good things through that, but it is limited. We can do a lot of things, but then we kind of get to that space where a lot of times people kind of land in my office, maybe yours as well, and they're like, I've done all of this stuff, but I'm still having symptoms, or I still can't get past this issue, and that's where the neurological approaches can kind of really come in and do that clean sweep, right? So thank you so much for sharing about your family and your son and your experience. It's so powerful when we have such lived experience and we can really speak anecdotally about how these things have worked in our own lives. And that's obviously not a match for every other person out there, but it certainly does help a lot.
I think so.
So I'm actually not overly familiar with biofeedback. No, I told you I use a remote neurofeedback program, and I also do EMDR therapy. But maybe you're familiar with neurofeedback, but can you share a little bit more about what biofeedback is and then maybe how it's different than those two things? And then we can kind of get into it.
Okay, so I probably should have clarified when I heard you say neurofeedback. So I use the term biofeedback as that broad term of giving the body information about itself.
Okay.
I also do neurofeedback. So
Okay.
the more specific kind of biofeedback that I do. So I don't know how our approaches are different or alike, but I do infralow neurofeedback, which basically means simply put, giving the brain information about itself, which
Mhm.
I'm sure there's real parallels between what we do.
Okay, so that's helpful. So it sounds like biofeedback is like a
Right.
title, and then
Mhm.
underneath of it are all of like the different modalities that would be qualified as a type of biofeedback. That's so great because I actually had a client contact me asking if I did biofeedback, and I said no because I didn't I didn't know, but I was like, wow, it sounds like maybe I do. So it sounds like that's an overarching theme, and then under it can come like neurofeedback. I don't know if an EMDR would be considered a biofeedback type of therapy.
I wouldn't think EMDR would, but I do
Okay.
think like heart rate variability,
Okay.
body temperature, basically any modality that gives the body information about itself and then the body responds and makes changes could be termed a biofeedback intervention.
So like would like breath work be on there? No.
I don't think, in my mind, I wouldn't categorize that there because
Okay.
I'm like, it does something for the body, but the body's not necessarily seeing something new about itself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about so was it the neurofeedback program that you were using with your son specifically? And is your neurofeedback program the kind where you have to come in office and they wear like the cap with the electrodes and it's connected to the computer? Is that it?
So I do not use cues like those
Oh,
EEGs. I don't. I am more of a symptom-based approach. We do not do remote work, but some people do remote work with the kind of equipment I have. That's just I like the in-person approach. So
okay.
I have just always just done in-office work. Currently, I have a large outpatient facility just with there are 11 counselors and we see over 1,000 appointments a month, and most people that come in do neurofeedback. That's a lot of people even travel here to do neurofeedback. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
we do
So they're connected to the computer.
correct. Yes, we do it in office, and then it's driven, by our observations and the observation that the client makes in between
Oh,
appointments.
so there's no electrodes.
Yes, yes, there are. Yes,
Oh,
there are electrodes. I meant observation, how we decide what we're going to do next. Like some people use that QEG model
that's
where
what
they're
mine is. Yeah.
using the cue to make decisions.
Yes.
Our approach is symptom driven.
Got
So
it.
it's more just collecting information. What are our focuses, and are we meeting those needs as we go?
Wow. Okay. So, would you say are kind of the top, that's a very large practice. Good for you. Amazing. What would you say are some of the maybe top three kind of symptomatic experiences or diagnoses that are coming into you and saying like, I need help?
Wow, that's a big question. We see a lot of anxiety, I
Hmm.
would say. We see a lot of kids with behavioral problems,
Hmm.
and a good number of people that I would put in the brain injury, say a stroke or a traumatic brain injury or a
Hmm.
birth trauma, or
Hmm.
like just like an injury to the brain would be a
Got it.
category that's pretty broad as well.
Okay. That's amazing. And so they're experiencing all kinds of different, and even like anxiety is a broad term, right? Which creates other symptomatic experiences related to sleep and digestive issues and um, other nervous system regulation problems that are from anxiety, as is a brain injury would cause other kinds of symptomatic experience. And so what has been the experience? kind of walk us through it. Like if somebody comes in, like how does it go? Like what are they saying is happening? And then how does the neurofeed, what happens scientifically? We don't have to geek out too much. I'm not a scientist, but we can a little bit. What happens scientifically with the neurofeedback and the brain that's changing those symptomatic experiences for the people?
So when people come in, we do a real thorough intake, and we really explore so many different things. I have an intake process that asks a ton of questions, and I just say, does this describe you most of the time?
Mm,
And I just whip through that, because what I find is by asking all those questions, I get a pretty good view of their nervous system, and I find things that I might not find in a typical intake, like
okay.
by just asking like questions about sleep and questions about pain and questions about mood and questions about digestion and questions about like just on like in so many different categories. And then when it's over, I'm like, okay, here are our primary focus points. So I identify by looking at that intake, these are things I think I have the capacity to help, and is there anything that I'm not telling you? So I might say poor quality of sleep, anxiety, anger when stressed. Like just looking at what are these primary issues and what can we do with them? And then after that, um, we did, and from that model, I decide where do these electrodes go? And what is my starting frequency? And if and frequency, my type of training is infra low training, so we train at really low frequencies, and I haven't always done that. I've really been honored to watch this field change over the last 25 years, because where we started is very different than where we are now. And we got good results 25 years ago, but the results we get now, I think are amazing. Like I
Mm,
love the fact that we can do things for people without doing harm. I think lots of things that we try to do in our society to help harm. It's like there's the potential for harm. And I feel like with biofeedback, it's kind of self-limiting. If somebody doesn't know what they're doing, they could do harm, but you would not come back for that. It's like as a person, if you're seeking treatment and somebody's making you feel worse every week, you're going to say, I'm done. And then because because you're not repeating it over and over again, you're not going to do harm, if that makes sense. Because the way biofeedback works is when you figure out what you want to do, you reinforce it, and then the brain's like, I can do that. So you're showing the brain how to do something new. And the way that works is you're looking at a computer, and simply put, when your brain does what you want it to do, the computer reinforces that. One of my favorite programs is a program that connects to YouTube. And when that program connects to YouTube, the person can actually watch something they enjoy. So a child can watch a cartoon or Dude Perfect, or an adult can watch something that they are interested in. And while that's happening, there is a box around the YouTube video. And when the brain's doing what we want it to do, the box is wide and you can see the whole video, and there's no fog on the screen, and the volume's strong.
mhm,
And that's like telling the brain, good job, good job. Yes, yes, yes. If the brain darts off and makes frequencies that we don't want, or has excessive frequencies, the box closes in, it's foggy, the volume goes down, and that's like telling the brain, no, no, no. So
mm,
it's all very much not, people are like, what goes through the electrodes? Nothing goes through the electrodes in.
mhm.
The brain waves come out and get transferred to the computer, but nothing's going in. You're simply getting information about your brain. When your brain gets that information, it leads to change.
That's, oh my gosh. So that's exactly the way I was trained as well, but we just use different language. So, the neurofeedback program I have is a remote neurofeedback program, and it's controlled through an app called MindLift. We use a device, I call it a headband. It has electrodes that go across the front of the forehead and then around the ears. And then there's an external one that we place on the scalp wherever we are training. So our programs are probably very similar. We do a very extensive intake and then a brain map. And then I have a one-on-one consult with the client. I share them the brain map, which is kind of cool. I don't know about yours, but they can actually see the brain map because I share the screen. So like where it's like lit up. So whether it's very red, like where the waves are, we have too many, or it's like blue and yellow, it's not enough. And so then it helps so much as a therapist to be able to validate their experiences. Oh my gosh, in your intake, you said you aren't sleeping well or you can't turn your brain off very well. Well, that's so interesting because right here we can see that you have too much alpha waves in your frontal lobe or whatever we're seeing to be able to really validate with their brain study what they are saying is they're experiencing in their body, which I find to be so valuable because so many times, I don't know about you, like, people in general, we tend to want to like minimize or it's like, is this really happening? Or maybe I'm making it up. Or, the therapist told me it was in my head, or the doctor said, it's just a gut issue. And so when we can show them, no, no, your waves are overactive here, and this is indication of trauma. Do you relate to that? Can you relate to that? And they're like, oh yeah, well, I have this history of sexual abuse or whatever. So, and then in ours is like it's all connected through that app. It's very user friendly on their phone. And so then the app basically does the same thing. When they start a session, we call it training, and it's like operant conditioning, right? So it's like Pavlov's dogs. So same thing. They stream it to wherever they want. It could be Netflix or a podcast, whatever, and then the screen will like brighten up or the volume goes down. And so they're getting that same feedback from the activity that they're measuring at the level of the scalp. So it's pretty magical,
Right.
frankly.
I think so too.
But you're lucky because I'm new to this part of the experience. Like I've been doing EMDR for quite a bit of time now, but I'm new to the neurofeedback section, which is very similar to EMDR. It's just a little different. But you've gotten to see the change from 25 years ago up until now, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it has. It has been such a journey. And one of my goals through the years, like with my son, I set this up in my den and I basically did a session every day for 40 days.
Hmm.
And we started with something called a TOVA, a test of variable attention. It's a really old, boring test. And when we gave it, he, you're basically the screen's in four quadrants, and if this light or this X comes up in a certain quadrant, you're supposed to click as fast as you can. And if it comes up in any other quadrant, you're not supposed to click. And at some point, the quadrant you're working with changes. And at the end of this test, on medication, he scored unscorable. Um, and so, which basically means he did so poorly that the machine's like, I can't even do anything with this. So 40 sessions later, 40 days later, I thought, and I wasn't giving him it was in the summer, so I thought, I'm not going to give this medicine and I'm going to do this every day. And me and my mom both thought he was better. Like we had talked about it, but then I would lay in bed at night and think, but what if he's not? Like I've changed my whole life. I've bought this equipment. I've done all this stuff.
Yeah.
At the end of the 40 days, I gave it to him again, and he did not want to take it. He's like, Mom, I hated that. And I'm like, I know, but you can do it. Like, and so he did, and he scored within normal limits. And I know,
Wow.
I was so happy because his
Wow.
impulsivity was dangerous. Like he had gotten on an oil wheel, he frequently wrecked his bikes, he threw rocks through things. Like his heart was good, but his level of self-control was almost just non-existent to the point and he was 14 at this point. I never thought he would drive because I mean he wrecked his bike constantly. He hit trees. He like
Wow.
there's just stuff all the time. And I'm like, what were you thinking? And he was like, well, I just thought that I could get around it. Like, so like even visually, he was highly
Mhm.
disorganized.
Mm.
So that really lit my fire because I was about ready to go into this private practice and leave the job I was at and do my own thing. And like I said, that was 25 years ago, and I've had multiple opportunities to work with kids in particular in
Mhm.
in rapid ways that have just been so powerful that like say a child in foster care that's blown
Mm.
every placement or that's been
Right.
inpatient for 17 months or that's
Mm.
just and it has just been such a delight to get to see that kind of transformation so rapidly And,
Mm.
that's where I've been working. That restorative ADA has come out of those opportunities to get to do things in a fashion that is rapid and life-changing.
Wow. Right. And I mean, you said 40 days for your son and you were getting that major result, like from nothing to normal, whatever, quote unquote. I mean, that is it's pretty unheard of. And frankly, I'm not, again, I don't have like research sitting in front of me, but anecdotally what I know about and what we've learned in the last 2 decades over my history of as a therapist too is our treatments are just like whatever traditional treatments with traditional talk therapy, and then like all of the pharmaceutical interventions and things, and even the CBT models and things, although they're valuable, they're not working. It's not working. And so I feel like it's so refreshing to hear you talk about this and also to see like you are just impacting so many lives, and especially at a young age. Think of all these young people who are now going to grow up so different, when you can catch that kind of stuff at a young age, even as young adults, even to go into their adulthood in a way different fashion because we had that kind of early intervention. So is like 40 days kind of, I mean, I know you were doing it every day, so you probably don't do that in your practice, but when you say rapidly, what is some of the kind of more average turnarounds for your clients?
Well, I'll have to say this. The technology when I worked with my son is nothing compared to the technology now. Like
Right.
years ago, the response time between the brain waves and the computer was 3 seconds. So there was like a 3 second, the brain did something, and within 3 seconds, the computer responded to say yes or no. Now the response time is 300ths of a
I
second.
know. It's
So
crazy.
the information is immediate, and we used to train at higher frequencies, and when we as we've shifted into these infra low frequencies, the responses have been better and better. So
Mm.
our current restore model is a 6 week preparation at home for people to get all the things that they need in order to be prepared for this intensive biofeedback. And we look at we kind of look at what does a person need, and then that's where we're meeting with them, we're talking about supplementation, we're talking about gut health, we're talking about attachment and what role that
Mm.
and our ability to have the life that we want to have. We look at things like fascia and how fascia stores trauma, and what are you eating and what are you drinking, and like it just depends on where we see somebody's weaknesses, like yeah, what's going on, and how do we best get you ready to be with us. And
Mm.
people come to us at the end of that 6 weeks. They're here for 2 weeks, and they have two biofeedback sessions a day. And so they get 20 sessions in 2 weeks, which is basically 5 months of biofeedback with our model in-house. And they also get like, again, we're teaching them how to cook appropriately, how to restore their gut, how to release the fascia in like even in the bottoms of your feet. That's such a big
Mm.
deal if you have trauma, about to understand if you work through that fascia, you will actually help yourself deal with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we look also at, I have PEMF technology, we have heart rate variability, we have, so this an amazing array of things that people participate every day between 9 and 6. And then at the end of that, we have a follow-up week. And then there's a year of something called Restore Plus, which is an online platform that has more information than you could digest in months. Like, and those things, because our thought for that is it gives you continued support. Like we actually have live things where we take questions and answers.
Mm-hmm.
We have the capacity for support groups if we get enough people in a certain area. We have all of this information about how do I reset my nervous system. So you go
Mm-hmm.
on, you find something that you're like, I can do this, you work at it. And then when you've got it, you come back for more. So
Mm-hmm.
that following year, you don't just, it's not like you leave and you're done, but you absolutely leave sleeping, calm, regenerated. Like it is an amazing reset for people, even the parents who come with their children. They get all the interventions except the biofeedback, and they will leave and say, I have never had stress this low because they're just applying those practical interventions of what do I do to get myself back in line? Because it is very difficult to be the parent of a child who is struggling.
You got that right. I get, yeah. So is it like a residential? It's not a residential program for 2 weeks,
Not
isn't it?
residential program, it's more like you would think of as day treatment.
Okay. For
Like
for nine to six or something, or
yeah,
eight to
9 to 3.
9 to 3.
And they get a morning and an evening biofeedback, and then all the other interventions take place in the course of the day.
Okay. Wow, that's incredible. And how many people do you have at one time each day?
A max of 8, and
Okay.
the same 8 would stay together the whole time.
So it's like a cohort kind of.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. And we wondered when we started, will it work if we mix children and adults? And
Mhm.
it does.
Yeah.
Like they just, it's such a positive thing.
Wow.
And we have and it's like I think it would be harder as we've watched things unfold. It would be harder to have 8 children, because they're all pinging off of each other. But when you
Mhm.
have adults and kids, and you have that different thing going on, it's just like you have this nice environment, and they eat lunch together, and they sometimes sit in activity, group things together.
Mhm.
But it's just a very calm, relaxed day with many opportunities to do things individually and as a group.
Wow. I just think this is so cool. It makes me want to see if there's anything similar happening on my side of the country.
I
You're
haven't
far.
found it. I
Yeah.
looked because that's what people always like. Can you compare it to something? And I'm like, I've Googled in every direction because
Yeah.
I just feel like that our current model doesn't work. And so I want to show
Oh
that
yeah.
there is a different model and that it can make a
Hmm.
difference. And, I would like to see, our society move towards things that work
Mm.
instead of things that just raise up children in trauma and then they leave into the world and are traumatized and then they have their babies and they can't take care of them. I want to see it all change. And I know
Hmm.
it's very lofty, but I'm just like, I think if I'm going to complain about the system, then I need to have another idea.
I love that, and I want to be a part of your campaign for that because two things that are on my mind as we're talking related to change. One thing that I complain about constantly. I sit in a couple councils here in our local area for mental health and substance abuse. Obviously, that's an area that I'm very passionate about, and one of them is very focused on kind of looking for gaps, and where are the gaps in our little community here in our county, and then broader in our state of Maryland. And we kind of work together to try to, as providers and all kinds of different providers come together, what do we see as the gaps? And one of the things that I always say and consistently say all the time is the lack of aftercare. And that I find to be just highly disturbing that we would send people, obviously in the substance abuse world, 28 days of substance abuse treatment is just not going to do it. It just isn't it. Even like 3 months of substance abuse treatment for many people, especially the opioid addicts who have been at this for decades, is not going to do it. And so, but yet we continuously think that it is, and they're happy to take your money.
Right.
And I'm not against rehab.
Right. But do you really think, though, that they don't understand that the model is often based upon the fact you're going to come back?
I
You're
know.
you're a
And I,
frequent
I
flyer.
know.
I have real issue with that.
I have a real issue with you. And I had actually had a conversation with another woman who is not in our world. She's an investigative journalist. Actually, that's published a couple months back, I think, who did a phenomenal, I think she wrote a whole book. I'll have to link it in the show notes on the rehab. I think the book was called like the rehab scam or something, like the fraud in our country. And she went through and investigated all of these work camps and stuff, which I had never even heard of, that were rehabs and stuff, but it was really awful and unethical and fraud. But yes, like this sort of roller, and again, I'm not against rehab. Personally, I think it's actually very helpful to get removed from your environment, place somewhere where you can focus on you. I think it works for a lot of people. But the revolving door model is so disturbing at like an ethical level for me, and I'm sure for you too, that it just makes me sometimes I do lose hope because it feels like you're fighting this like unachievable system, I guess, or thing, but we can't stop trying. But that's anyway, that's the one thing that you said that I love. You have a year long at what I would consider an aftercare program where you're allowing people to still be a part of your world. You're providing them with tools, with treatment, and frankly, with life skills because everybody isn't aware of a lot of things, no matter who you are, even the ones that are like fairly well adjusted. You grew up in a regular family, or like not just foster kids or people living on the street that don't have life skills. There's a lot of people that are like missing out on just some basic things like, you should really brush your teeth twice a day. Let's get to the dentist twice a year. How do we get a doctor? How do I find childcare for my daughter? Like these are things that people need to be taught. And they're just not. So I love the aftercare piece, and I just can't highlight enough how critical. That's way above my pay grade, but that's just a missing link in our community, in our society, totally non-existent. And then the second thing that I think is huge that I would really love to talk to you about, although it's fairly controversial, but really in our world right now, is our medication situation. And it's coming up now, and it's being highlighted. I just had a little convo in my therapist email net listserv that's probably going to blow up later when everyone reads it. But it's not a secret that we have a serious problem. That like, and if you don't think we do, or you just think that everybody who's prescribed medication needs it, and they should be getting SSRIs when they're 8 years old, and if you don't see that they're building customers for life, and that they have no interest at all in making people well, like at all, then you really are missing it. It has nothing to do with political affiliation or what side you're on or who you like or don't like. Those are just facts. And it's so disturbing to see what's happening in our society, but yet these professionals are now speaking up. So I love this. I love this space we're in for the opportunity. These legit like psychiatrists, real like people are speaking up and saying we are making people sicker.
Right.
Um, so I'm just curious about where you are with that, and then also just not just an opinion piece, but like what you're seeing is in relation to that and with neurofeedback treatment and also your aftercare, because it can't not help to get people more regulated. And just secondarily too, the other part of that, before I give it over to you, is the part that pisses me off that I think people don't really understand is that to come off of those medicines is very uncomfortable. And that's why people don't do it. So it's like coming off the reference earlier that what I'm referring to was some kind of reference about it being similar to heroin, getting clean off of heroin, and people were saying, rebutting against that, and I'm like, I mean, it may not be exactly, but it says specifically it has to be tapered down over time with the care of a professional because the withdrawal symptoms can be so severe, it can harm people and be fatal. So to me, that means, yeah, that looks exactly the same then. So yeah, it's just a little antidepressant, no big deal, a little Lexapro. And I'm not saying I'm anti-medication either. There's a place for certain things. It's a tool, but it's supposed to be a short-term tool often. It's situational that we work on other things and then we come off because our bodies, as you know, are already making these chemicals. And what's happening is the body is not making them properly. And so we insert the tool to help give it to it. But you stay on it for 10 years and now your body doesn't make that tool anymore. It says, I don't need that because you're giving it to me every week or every day. I don't have to make dopamine or serotonin because you're giving it to me. And so then when you stop doing that and try to go off, it's not an instant fix for your brain to be like, oh, I have to recreate serotonin by myself. It can get there, but it's a long time. And most people don't want to be uncomfortable for that long. So that is a truth that I feel like is not being said by enough people and needs to be heard by regular Americans. That's why.
I agree. I'm gonna kind of go at it backwards and talk about the follow-up care first, because within that follow-up care of Restore Plus, there are things about here's how to know if you don't make enough dopamine, and here's what you need to do to increase your dopamine naturally. Here's what about serotonin? What about like all of those things, what they do, why they might not be working, and what to do differently. Because within that, like the person, everybody wants a fast fix.
Yeah.
And everybody wants it to be. People come here and want biofeedback to do everything. Biofeedback will do a lot, but you
Mhm.
got to do something. And that's what I've had people say, who would you think would not be suited for Restore? And I'm like, somebody who doesn't want to change anything, because we are going to ask you to change a lot, but we are going to support you while you change. And in terms of that Restore Plus piece, we've created that in such a way that you can do it at your own pace and that it's also open to others as well. So it's and I because I feel like in everything I do, there's always a limit to how much you can do.
Mhm.
Like people are waiting for an appointment, people are waiting for this, people are waiting for that. Well, Restore Plus is only $7 a month. And the reason it's $7 a month is because anybody, give up a cup of coffee and you can do something to begin to reset your nervous system. And those practical pieces all stacked together like building blocks will get you so much better results than medication. So
Mhm.
I'll shift now to medication. I absolutely agree with you. I feel like medication and the way we use it for children is criminal.
Criminal. It's child
It
abuse.
it is. We remove children from and the most abused are those in foster care.
It's
And
child abuse.
we remove children from their home and we act like the fact that they act bad is somehow a medicine issue. That is insanity. I would like to, I think, people to say, well, you've got to do something. Well, what you have to do is not give them six adult medications in adult dosages. I've seen children run through plate glass windows. I have seen children threaten homicide, threaten suicide. And and then when you act like that, then they lock you up. That's their words. I've spent days and weeks with children working through the trauma they received in inpatient care. I
Yes.
don't believe our children who are incarcerated don't like part of the reason is their trauma, but then the secondary reason is the medication they put them on that makes them feel crazy. And when kids don't have the words or the power to articulate, I don't feel right. This is wrong. They don't necessarily understand that, but they're acting out of that. I have seen children arrive in my office slobbering, walking in a slanted fashion. I've seen little boys grow boobs, and once they remove the medicine, the boobs don't go away. They'll be 50, 75, 100 pounds overweight.
Mm.
They are constipated. Nobody deals with their bowels. That I have learned that anytime I get one of these little guys that have been through the medication ringer to say, how often do you poop? And what they say is unbelievable. So no one is taking care of the problems that are created.
Mhm.
Like I have had children, and this is the honest truth. This sounds insane. I've had a foster parent come in and hand me her phone and say, I took pictures of this because if anybody sees his rectum, I'm afraid they'll arrest me. And they were cutting up 3 or 4 inch poop in the toilet because it was so hard with a knife trying to get it to go down the toilet. And what does that do to a child's rectum?
Mhm.
Like, and nobody's checking on this. I'm like, when you were in the hospital, did they talk about like, did you poop when you poop? No, no. Like their gut function is being ruined. Our mental health is no better than our gut health.
Right.
Whole medicine, and I feel like that for adults, it's not a ton better, but adults are at least adults. Adults are making the decision themselves to do this
Mhm.
and can make the decision to not do it. I feel like oftentimes
Mhm.
they're misinformed or underinformed about
Mhm.
the ramifications, and that should be a requirement before giving it to people. But the stacking of these mental health meds, especially meds, people are like, well, they wouldn't have given it to him if it wasn't tested. That is a lie. Tested on who? What person that weighs 100 pounds has ever taken this six medications in this dosage? No, it's not. It is not tested. It's not even tested for adults. They might test it in isolation, but when you read the study, sometimes it says for 6 weeks. How is that a test? I get people that come in on Ambien that have been on Ambien for 20 years.
Right.
And when you look up Ambien, it says it's a short-term medication.
It's criminal.
It
Criminal.
is. Like we have so much misinformation. And this is truly one of my biggest issues in saying I can do this better in simple, straightforward ways, and I will do no harm.
I want to join you on that. Please include me in anything you're doing because I am so passionate about this too, but my capacity is limited on my knowledge. You are more of an expert, and I love what you said about all of the kids and the trauma. And I started my career in social services, so I'm familiar with that system and what that's like. And I understand that. And also, not only are the young people that you're referring to versus like adults, adults have a fully formed brain. They have a fully developed frontal cortex, who can think and also their brain is fully formed. So children's brains are still being formed. So they don't have an adult brain, a thinking brain. And they also, when you start to input like substances, drugs, alcohol, including pharmaceuticals, you're damaging their brain development. So like just like I talk to my young people all the time about weed and how, they smoke and drink or whatever, but like it's your brain is not formed. So you've inserted this substance that's now damaging the development of your brain, which is kind of crappy. Like I'd like everybody's brain to be developed properly, right? So there's that piece also, but then let's just normalize it for 1 second before we even move on. Like, what about the regular, quote unquote, regular kids that's not in foster care? What about the kids down the street from my house in our public school where there's 1,100 kids in that elementary school building, grades K through 5, 1,100 kids. And that's gigantic. We pulled our kids out of there a long, long time ago. But like, if there's nothing wrong. It's a cream of the crop school here. Trust me. It is like one of the best. They're like the best schools in our area. But you got regular kids down there who are all on ADHD medication, other psychotropics or whatever. So we don't have to have these kind of capital T level traumas to have these kids land in an office that then says, oh, put them on medication because well, I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but we're asking our young boys in America to sit in a chair when they're 5 years old until they're 10 years old with minimal breaks, without a snack, without going outside, and to do things that are not naturally the way they're supposed to behave. And then we want to complain about it. So I'm not saying that there aren't kids that I have ADHD. I get it. My daughter has major ADHD. I get it. But like we do things wrong. We do things that are not helpful to our people that are then creating problems. But to stay on the medication bandwagon, as we know, nothing that you're talking about, like you already mentioned, only costs $7, or even the stuff I provide, or even other high-level therapists that are charging a big bucks for the per dollar per hour, isn't going to make those drug companies any money.
Right.
And so that's the criminality of it, right? And they're making us sick. They're making us more and more sick. When there are solutions, right? There are solutions, but you also, it's a whole system issue too, because then you have parents, they scare them, right? It's just kind of like other issues that are happening now where constantly people are being told, oh, they're going to kill themselves, and you're like, oh my God, so what am I to do? I have to do this thing, this horrible life-changing thing, right? Because they're so scared of their child making this dramatic move, right? And so instead of kind of trying to find ways to help them work with their children and their families and all that through other natural wellness things, they go the medication route because it is seemingly the easier way. But they're making lifelong clients, if we just think about it that way, you know?
Right. And I totally agree about the whole educational system. My observation is we want little boys to be little girls. Like
Yeah.
we want them to sit quietly. We want them to color within the lines. We want their feet on the floor. We want them not to talk or make noises.
Mhm.
Developmentally, boys are different than girls, and we have long known that. That is not a new concept, but we don't like it, and we prefer calm, still, quiet, not moving. It doesn't matter if that's what we prefer. That was not how they were created, and
Mhm.
we should give great latitude for small boys to be small boys without acting like something's wrong with them. You know,
Right.
it is a horrible dilemma
Well,
that
and that, I mean, and we can't, it's no one, it's hard. We don't want to point fingers. It's not like, oh, it's the teacher's fault or it's this, it's a system issue, right? It goes
it
out, out, out,
is.
out. The classes are too big. They don't have support from the administration. The teachers are asking to do too much, like, so it's not like we can say, oh, it's not that. I understand that. It's a way bigger problem that goes, the ripple effects are way out there. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't take a look at that and constantly be trying to figure out how to make it better or create systems that do provide that to be better, like your facility, right? Or smaller school environments that are accessible to our children, or like just education around food and wellness. I mean, the biggest people who are, I think, horrible in our country are big food and big pharma. I mean, they're making us and keeping us sick, and they need it to be that way, or else they won't be in business, or at least not in the way they are today. And so I get it from their standpoint. Like they are running a business. They are not sitting here thinking about your kid. They don't care. They don't. They're thinking about the bottom line, you know?
But we are as a society, we're allowing them to run the business in this way, and we're allowing it to go on without enough pushback. It's like the road to healing is connection because connection changes the brain.
Yes.
Those medications impede connection.
Yeah.
Like you cannot connect with a child who you can't even keep awake.
The other
You
part of it too that I think is so important, and this is one of the kind of arguments that I was making in my discussion earlier, is I think truly the issue in our current society, and maybe hopefully you'll agree, is a failure to cope. Like our people, young people and adults even cannot be uncomfortable. They cannot manage any kind of discomfort. They cannot deal with a failure, a failing grade. They cannot deal with a breakup or any kind of a loss or any kind of even regular, normal problems that you and I experienced too when we were growing up. And somehow we had to kind of feel the sadness and feel the depression and then work through it. And like we had supports on that, right? But today we do have a failure to cope. And then that leads everybody into this automatic solution of we'll medicate it or whatever instead of what is going on, like why do you have anxiety? I
right,
treat a lot of anxiety too, like, and I get it, that you weren't born like that, you weren't born with that, like you were, something happened that changed your brain and created this symptomatic experience, and most likely it was some kind of a trauma or something. And trauma, by the way, is relative, right? It could be words people said. It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It can be just everyday things that your brain didn't process properly, so that created anxiety for you. Why do you have it? And nobody, most the mainstream people aren't getting to the why do you have it part, and that's why we have a failure to cope, because they're not challenging them on that. Hey, you know what, sometimes life is really uncomfortable. Actually, most of the time life is really uncomfortable. We
right.
need to kind of get back to that, normalize that. Yeah, that sucks. I'm so sorry. I'm going to sit here with you. We're going to go get ice cream. We're going to watch a movie. I'm going to sit with you, but and you're going to get through this. But it sucks,
Right.
and they can't do it.
Yeah. They
You know,
can, but they don't.
they don't do it.
And it does build it builds a weak adult.
It builds a wicked. Well, it's adults too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel
It's
like
like
it's the whole
if
thing.
right. But if we don't raise our children and let them deal with consequences and
Right.
pain and struggle, they won't, it's like they might get a bit better when they get frontal
Mhm.
lobe development,
Yeah,
but they still don't have the strength that just a normal life of dealing with a struggle and coming out on the other side and then like, oh, I can do this.
yeah,
This happened and I'm alive
that's
and
right.
I'm a little stronger than I was before it happened.
We need to normalize that. We need to bring that back, because I think in our, like, the Gen X people were raised by that, some of that, but we didn't have a lot of the emotional validation and other things, but we had that kind of autonomy and like personal responsibility piece. And we do need to, I think, circle back on that. It's a big missing link, and our kids need it. So anyway, I know you got a hard stop, but I really need to have another conversation with you. I love your work so much. This is so inspiring.
I'd be
It's
happy to do it again.
I want to, well, we're gonna have another call, yeah, because I want to learn more about some more specifics about your practice and some of the tools you're using, and maybe try to figure out how I can access that. Just some of the things, like I love how you mentioned talking about how can you increase your dopamine, how can you, like just some of those natural resources that we could use with our clients, just as life skills. Um, but anyway, how do you like people to reach out when they want to get a hold of you?
Our website is restoreofada.com, and there you can email us from there. You can look at our programs. You can see about Restore Plus. So that's a great place to go.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure I link to that below. And I just thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for the work you're doing, the inspiration. Let's make this concept spread across the country and beyond, and just help people to normalize some of the stuff we've been talking about and get better and not sicker. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.